What would a coffee table look like if it had been built by somebody who's never built a coffee table before? Well, you're all about to find out. My youngest daughter recently moved away from home to go to college, and she's got her own place now, so I thought I would build her a piece of furniture to go in it. I wanted to build something that I could use the CNC machine and my laser cutter on, and I come up with the idea of a coffee table with an insert that would hold a mandala layered art. I'm sure you've seen them. They're very beautiful, and I've always wanted to make one, so this gave me the excuse to do it. I decided to build a tabletop frame in the legs out of hard maple, and it'll also have an acrylic glass top in it that you can see the mandala art design underneath. And what you've seen me do here so far is I flatten and surface the boards that I'll use for the tabletop frame, and then I'll cut out a channel on the sides for the acrylic glass to go into, and then I'll use a big 90-degree V-bit to cut the miter corners out of. After cutting the channels out, I'll do a profile pass on each board to cut it down to its final dimensions. I bought a cheap 2-inch 90-degree V-bit off Amazon just for this project, and I didn't realize how big it would be. This thing just screams death and destruction, and I have to admit, when I turned this thing on, I stood back from the table till it was done because it's a little intimidating. But it did make a nice cut. And on the side of the board that would ended up being to the outside of the frame of the table, I wanted to put something simple and decorative on it, so I just used a molding tool path to cut this little design out in it. And as with anything I make for my kids, I always leave them a little note from Dad. Like I mentioned a while ago, I'm going to use a piece of acrylic glass to go on the top. This is a 1/4 inch thick, and I'm using the laser to cut it down to its final dimensions. Now, I'm generally a one-man show in my shop, and I knew that putting the frame together and trying to fit that piece of glass in there at the same time was going to be a tall order, so I put those pieces of ply down with a towel over it to hold the acrylic glass up off the table a little bit, so that when I started assembling the frame, I wouldn't have to struggle so much to get the glass to go into the channels. I've used these band clamps in previous projects and they have absolutely been a lifesaver. Really works out great, but when I was figuring the size of this thing, I soon discovered that it was just barely big enough, but it had enough stretchiness in the straps that I could at least pull it and kind of force it. I think if it had been an inch bigger, they wouldn't have worked. These things really do come in handy, and there's a link down in the description if anybody's interested in them. They're really cheap, but they work very well. Now the Mandela stuff that you see, at least the one that I've seen, they're basically layered ply cut out, and you want each layer to be a different color. So I figured that every other board I would just stain, and I'm not trying to stain this to be pretty. I just want it to be a solid color to differentiate each layer from each other. So I used a dark stain, and then I used a lighter stain, and then for the every other layer I'll just leave the natural finish of the ply. Now, if you watched my previous video, I mentioned to you that Monport Laser sent me this CO2 laser to add to my projects, and I've got to tell you, this thing is a game changer. It has truly opened up some major opportunities for me in projects that I would have ordinarily not ever been able to do. It is really an outstanding machine, and if you're interested in it or interested in shopping, I'll leave a link down in the description, and you can use my coupon code to get 10% off of your purchase off of anything off the Monport site. Now, in doing my research on how to properly build this Mandela design, I saw other folks would glue each layer together, but I figured I would just sandwich them in together inside of the frame. I built it so the dimensions were the perfect size to the dimensions of the Mandela art, and so I just dropped them in and they fit perfectly together. Now, I'm really pleased how this turned out. I really think it looks beautiful. Now, like I mentioned, I bought the file off of Etsy. There's not a lot of resources for very complicated Mandela art to cut out. If anybody knows of a good resource to buy these things, please leave a comment. I'd really appreciate it. Here I'm cutting out wood blocks that will go in the four corners underneath the coffee table, and they'll have two functions. One is to hold the table legs on, but I'll also glue them into the corners, and they'll act as structural supports for the miter corners to keep them nice and strong. And I bought these threaded inserts off of Amazon, and that's what I'll use to screw the table legs into the table. And after a quick trip to the table saw, I cut each one down to 3" by 3" square. And not only did I glue the supports in, but I wanted to put a few tacks in it too to help keep it strong, secure. Now I drew up these table legs on Fusion to create the STL to cut out on the rotary, and I actually designed it from memory from a piece of old furniture that my mom and dad had when I was a kid. And even as a kid, I thought they were cool, so I tried my best to try to recreate that, and I think I got pretty close. I think they look good. And then after the model was cut out, I did a parting pass to cut the model out from the blank. I bought myself a mini lathe a few months ago thinking that I would like to try turning some stuff, but I soon discovered that wood turning takes a high level of precision, grace, and talent that I do not possess. And so this lathe has been sitting on the shelf for quite a while, but it makes a great sanding machine. Now before I put everything together, I sanded everything down with 120. Here I'm doing some finish sanding with 220 to get everything nice and smooth. And this is the point where I would finish this thing out with Rubio's. I've mentioned you guys that Rubio's has been my favorite finish, but I'm actually kind of not sure what to finish it with, and I'm not finishing it. I'm wanting to ask you guys what I should use to finish this. So if you'll leave that down in the comments, I'll deeply appreciate it. So there you have it, my first coffee table. It was really quick and easy to make, and I think my daughter will like it. She's into that Art Deco stuff. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it immensely, and I'll see you next time. Y'all take care.